welcome everyone to 5 Questions with Your Classical Educator. I am Dr. Erin Moulton. I'm assistant to the principal at St. Raphael School, and today's guest is Miss Sarah Smith. And I'm going to let her start by introducing herself and what she teaches at St. Raphael so we can get started. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Erin. So as she said, I am Sarah Smith. I am a mom of 3 kids under the age of 4. So my house is very lively and chaotic right now, but I'm trying to enjoy the chaos. I teach this upcoming year, I teach level 5 catechism, which is for middle schoolers. And then I teach level 6 liberal arts, which is ancient history. And this upcoming year is the Roman year. So we're specifically looking at the Roman Empire and the early church. So like a minority church within Rome. That's kind of the focus of that class. And so the catechism class is a biblical scope and then really relating it into our Orthodox liturgy and Orthodox lifestyle in churches. So that's the 2 classes I'll be offering this upcoming year. I have an MDiv, and I love biblical history and everything surrounding it, all the surrounding cultures and everything that made the Bible and church history and all of that. That's what I love. So that very much comes out in my classes.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I know that you like in your classes to do some fun projects and writing too. I've heard rumors of that. So I think the students really enjoy it. So our second question is sort of related, but I hope it's going to tell us a little more about you. So it's a simple question. Why do you teach?
I teach because, specifically kind of tied to what I teach is I love making both the Bible and like our ancient people of where we come alive. Like I love making, it's not black ink on a white page. These are our ancestors. This is our heritage. And we still do this to this day. And really bringing that out. I've always been kind of nerdy and passionate about it since as long as I can remember. I've been super into the oldest stories in our Bible and the weird images of Revelation. And I mean, I've just always been into that. And so really kind of bringing that into, there's a continuity of that and to still what we do in the church and who we are. It's still there. It's, I just like hashing that out. And I super love, I've really fallen in love with actually the middle school age, which surprised me. When I was originally hired, I was kind of going to teach just the high school age, and I was asked to teach middle school. And I was a little nervous at first, but I loved it. I think middle schoolers have that no fear of, there's no like filter. It's just that childlike no fear. And yet they start having that cognitive, like kind of high school, I want to wrestle through things. And I think that combination has been really fun to teach. I know that wasn't the question, but I love that age.
I love that
great.
answer as a parent of a middle schooler too, because we have this conversation in my home and in my family all the time. People complain about middle schoolers sometimes, and it is a rough time of life, but it's such a great age. I kind of personally love like 4th grade up through 8th or 9th. They're just so like ready to learn and explore. And you're totally right about being uninhibited, which is super fun. For those of us adults who have become inhibited a little bit in some way, or maybe you aren't actually, I don't know.
I think it depends on my mood.
Yeah, I know. I get that too. Okay, so the next question, I think for me, this is the hardest one. It might not be for you. What book has been formative to who you are?
So this is going to seem like a cop-out answer, and it's really not, I promise. The book of Genesis.
Oh, cool.
I think it's ultimately been the most formational book for me. I started loving Genesis, I think probably middle school age, because you just start questioning like, why are there 2 creation stories? And like, what do I do with this? And what does this mean for scientific method? And what does this mean for faith? And what does this mean? It's the oldest stories. And there's sibling rivalry and really confusing like couples coming together and what's going on. It's a whole different era of history. And so you kind of wrestle with it, but it's also like the beginnings. And so I think I always kind of, no matter what I read, if I'm reading fantasy, if I'm reading nonfiction, if I'm reading, the themes that you find in Genesis are themes that you find in no matter what you're reading. And so I think as someone who I still always come back to Genesis, even as an adult, I really love looking at those stories, these oldest stories that are, just this beautiful blend of history and also like a people group harboring a heritage. And so it's the messiness of history coupled with an identity of people being told from century after century after century and being written down. It's messy and it's beautiful. And I think it teaches you how to think and how to identify who you are. And I think I always love coming back to those patriarchs and matriarchs and creation narratives and serpents in the garden and all that means. I just love it. I just love Genesis, and it is a book and it is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, for anyone listening, I don't think that's a cop-out answer. Oh, I love that answer. And I actually don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, give that answer. For those of you who will take classes with Mrs. Smith, I know how passionate she is about these ideas. And I think you've done such a great job already telling us, giving us an example of how liberal arts works, and really our catechism too at St. Raphael, because we always want to be integrated, right? And you're so right that all the themes that are in Genesis show up in literature, all kinds of world literature. I'm even thinking right now of something we're going to read in level 3 this year that's about brothers and sibling rivalry. And this book is from medieval Korea, actually. And so, but there's another parallel. I think there's so many universal themes that show up right there. So that's one of the things we love at St. Raphael is how when we read literature, when we look at art, when we listen to music, how do the themes there also connect to our sacred texts and to our traditions and to our faith and to who we are as a people and who God is, right? So I love that. I love hearing how it integrates together. So what about beauty? We like to think about beauty a lot. And I always think that beauty is maybe more complicated than sometimes we make it, right? So tell us, what has been one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen?
I have multiple answers. So I'll give like a short little of each one. The Black Hills of South Dakota, I think is the most beautiful place. I lived in Hill City, South Dakota for 2 summers working there. I love it. I love Custer State Park. I love Needle Point Highway. I love that rocks, mountains coupled with evergreens and ponderosa pines and the smell and to me, and part of it is living there. I think that's another thing is we can see things and they're beautiful, but it's participating in what's around you and that like Western out West culture of the area and people who are like local and their whole business is tourism and I just find that area it's still beauty to me is picturing. That's when I think of a beautiful landscape, that's where my mind goes. I think of a newborn, your own newborn smiling at you for the first time is probably the most beautiful moment. It's that moment where like it's true recognition and knowledge and knowing, and it's a baby recognizing I know you, and that's probably one of the most beautiful things. It's just that recognition and knowing. And then my third thing I think is beautiful is I spent a summer in Israel doing an archaeological dig and going to different archaeological sites, and pottery is just like literally coming out of the ground there because it's so old. And, I live in America. We are only 300 years old. We don't have these, in the scope of history, we don't have historic buildings. I mean, really in the scope of, we're a blip. And the people that have lived here before us were so living off the land, they didn't leave a big mark. And so I think really living there and just no matter where I went, it was just like pottery was coming up out of the ground and you would dig and you would see these vessels that were just thousands of years old, and just this idea of this is gonna be one we dug up on the site where we were. It was Abel Beth Maacah. There was a skeleton of a puppy, like a skeleton in death in a burn layer around some like what looked to be like household items. And it was just this idea of like this dog died kind of curled up in a burn layer. So that means like everything in that layer was very destructive. You could quite see like ash in the layer.
Mm-hmm.
There's this skeleton of, and so you just think about the life that came before and lived here. They had this dog, and this dog died there. I know that's morbid, and yet, but that's what we do now. 2,000 years later, we have pets, and we have cats and dogs and live in our house. And so this idea of really this connectivity of just finding things in the earth and holding it in proof of life that is so old. And I think it's very foreign, I think, as an American, because our history is so new. We just don't live in this very old, archaic society, and you don't walk around seeing old things. Yeah. I think that's beauty, is that mark of what has come before, and where is my story in that. So those were 3 very different answers, but those are my 3 images of what is beauty.
Oh, I love it. My family's big fans of the Black Hills, by the way. That's one of our, to this day, we do a lot of national parks trips, and to this day, my kids say the Badlands and Custer State Park are at the top of their list. So we love it.
Where did you stay did you just drive through, or did you like stay in the Black Hills area?
We did stay in the Black Hills, actually in Custer.
Okay.
Well, we've been a few times, actually. We baptized a godchild in Rapid City at one point, and a little secret, I think you might be a SRS student this year. So it's been a few years ago. And then we've done multiple trips to the Badlands. We're big fans, but the Black Hills are just beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I just want to say to our families, if we could have picked someone to love history, to teach history to our students, certainly this is who it is. I love the way you conceive of history and think about that. Connecting us to all that. Oh, and a state park reference. We're going to go on forever. So I will say, have you ever been to Mesa Verde in Colorado, where there are these ancient cliff dwellings of Native Americans? At some point, you're going to have to take your kids there, because they're really old. Yeah, they're not as old as probably what you were digging up in the Holy Land, but they're still hundreds and hundreds of years old. And it's the only example that I know of, really, of these ancient like buildings that you can see. But it's a national park now. Yeah. That's another favorite I feel. So, all right. How about this? So tell us a little bit more about your courses. What goodness could someone expect from your course, or your courses, I should say?
I would say it's very much, the word I want to use is rooting yourself in current orthodoxy, but realizing that current orthodoxy goes back to the beginning. It's, I'm not teaching a Torah class this upcoming year, but I'm very big on those old Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and really kind of comparing Leviticus to the current Orthodox Church, comparing Numbers to the Orthodox Church, Genesis, all that stuff. And that follows, I think, everything, because my classes, if you're taking catechism with me, it's very much a survey of the Bible in like a 2-year rotation. So we touch on different parts in each year, but you're getting the biblical history and who are the major players in the Bible, and where do we identify ourselves in that, and how does this relate to the liturgical year, and how does this relate to our liturgy? I mean, all of that comes out. So I think it's rooting yourself in that. And then my history classes, it's very much my goal is very much like 50% secular history, 50% like religious history. But I will say, in the back of my mind, if this is it's a liberal arts class, and it's what do we take from our history? And I would say that a large of that was an Orthodox identity from where do we see ourselves, and if it's the Roman year, in ancient Rome, and what do we identify, what happens in ancient Rome in terms of government and civics that we still do, or what maybe do we do that's a bad thing, and what do we see in the church that developed in this era that held on, or what things in the church developed that didn't hold on, and why are those things the way they are, and how do we own that and root ourselves in that, or how do we cast off that and say that's not who we are in Christ. So I think it's just looking at history in this beautiful era where the church as church proper post Christ develops, and what's in that from both the world and a holy family sense. When I say holy family, I mean like us as a family of Christ in holiness. That's what I mean. And so I think that will come out in different ways. The history is more, I would say, concrete, and the Bible, the catechism class is more a theological kind of understanding. But both, if you're having a class for me, that's no matter what I'm teaching, it's really connecting this kind of ancient heritage to what we do today in our liturgical season, in our homes. And also really talking about where does our history differ from our Protestant brothers and sisters in Christ, our Catholic brothers and sisters in Christ. I studied my way into Orthodoxy and kind of identified, basically, I saw the tabernacle worship happening in front of me, and that was kind of my hook in. And so I do have a deep respect for, we live in a nation that is very not Orthodox minded. America is not heavily Orthodox. And so when we come up against Christianity, we come up against Protestant ideals, Catholic ideals. And so really also taking the time to say, here's where we differ. Here's where we don't. How did we get here? And respecting kind of everyone's tradition in that, and seeing where we differ and what we're a part of. I think I'm very big on that as well. That kind of came out, I know, when I teach, of people want to know why does my friend who goes to this church not have icons in their church? You know what I mean? It's just things like that come out. And anyway,
I love that.
I'm digressing.
No, I think it's fantastic for you to share that with our families. And, we often say we're continuing to really work through, what does classical education mean in an Eastern Christian perspective, in an Orthodox perspective, and how are we integrating those things? And so we're so glad to have you here helping us do that, helping us think about how we look at Rome in light of who we are as Orthodox Christians, and how we look at that portion of history, how it has affected us and hasn't. I know, as a parent who's raised some kids through into college and some not, these are conversations we have in our home all the time, because most of us live in largely a Western culture, and we're embracing an Eastern Christian tradition. So it's so wonderful to think about how all those texts integrate, and where they don't, right? Where we have to differ, all of those things.
Or how we interpret a line of scripture, or something that someone wrote, where is the interpretation and the history of how did we get to these two different, how did that happen and why? And so
fantastic. Well, now you've made me want to come sit in on one of your classes. I might have to sneak in. I'm so excited to have you joining us. What else would you like to share with us? Anything else you want to share with listeners, with people who may want to enroll? Anything?
I'm only bringing this up because my students loved it. It happens before breaks, like before Thanksgiving break and Christmas break and Holy Week break. I do the riddles called Stories with Holes.
I love a story with holes.
Go nuts over them. I mean, I'm telling you, I feel like at the end of the year, all people remember is the stories of holes. Do more stories of holes, Mrs. Smith. I'm a big fan of Stories of Holes, and the kids love it. And I just want to share that because we do stop and have fun, because I think I don't get intense, but I get like really into it. And so it's nice to just step back and say, let's just have fun. And I do genuinely love getting to know all the students. I saw a meme on Facebook this year that it was from some teacher page, and it said in September, it was just a list of names, but by May I'm trying to remember, it was something about like lives in my life. Like, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Something like, instead of a list of names on a roster, it was concrete, like people who are in my life. And that very much happened last year. Like, just it is a list of names, but it quickly becomes people that I think about when I drive by and I see a soccer field. I thought of one of my students who's really into soccer. And when I saw little things that made me think of my students, and just loved that process of really realizing that it's not data that I'm imparting. It's a life that I'm sharing with them. And this is my expertise. Now bring yourself to the Zoom screen and let's really kind of figure this out together. And I know I'm going to be more minded of that this time, now that I've been through it. This is not just data. This is like pulling at each other through the screen.
Absolutely. We have such a beautiful community at St. Raphael. And I'm so glad you said that, because I often share with families that the first time that I came to teach here, I was pretty skeptical. I think this is my 4th year this year. I kept thinking, I don't know how this is going to work. And I just continually marvel at how attached we all become to each other. And there's so much that we can do so wonderfully and so beautifully on a Zoom screen and really become a part of each other's lives. In fact, sometimes I tell families, I think in some ways this becomes more intimate than an in-person classroom, because we are kind of in each other's homes, and I'm always mindful of that. People hear me say this all the time. I know that my voice when I'm teaching is coming into the sacred space of your home. And it's so wonderful that we get invited into people's homes,
I know. I hear the
really
siblings running in the back.
Yeah.
I see them poking in and out. I know they're hearing me.
It's truly beautiful. It's truly like an amazing way that we get to interact with each other and form real community, even though sometimes we don't see each other in person, but then eventually we do. I've seen a few students in person in the last couple of years who have come through, or I've gone through their cities. So
I had a student's mom last year in the Torah class I taught. She eventually just kind of sat on screen with her daughter, like just taking notes. So it's just,
awesome.
you just get to know each other,
Yeah,
so
we really do. It's such a gift. It's so wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted for people to get to hear your thoughts. And why don't you remind everyone the courses you're teaching so they can go search for them if they want, and we'll include links also on social media, of course.
Yeah, I'm teaching Catechism 5. I think it's called Lives of the Saints for middle school ages. And then I'm teaching Liberal Arts 6, and that's called I think it's called Ancient Classics History. And I will say really quickly, the class is designed, there's another person teaching Ancient Classics Literature. And so the class is designed, you don't have to, you can take one or the other, but you can also take them in tandem at the same time. And we're starting at kind of the same point in history and ending at the same point, but the other teacher will be doing more focus on the literature of like kind of the more heavy works and bringing out those themes, as where I'm more focused on the timeline of history and the major players and the saints and the kind of the political sphere. And so if you take them both together, you're kind of getting a larger scope. So it's, I forgot to mention that. So
thanks for explaining that. And that's always a change for our liberal arts families. So if you've gone all the way through liberal arts 5, all of those classes are fully integrated. You only enroll in one course essentially, and levels 4 and 5 meet several days a week. But when we get to level 6, 7, and 8, or 6 and 7, I should say, they split essentially into 2 courses to enroll in. And you're right, you can enroll in both. Lots and lots of people do. But if you want to only do literature, only history, that's an option too. So yeah, thanks so much for explaining that. If anyone has questions, you can email either of us and we are glad to help. And then a reminder, join us for courses. Thanks so much.
Thank you.